at a number of points, you write sympathetically about various visions of a binational state. George Antonius was a proponent of one, Martin Buber, and you approvingly seem to cite various iterations of such a plan. And then at the tail end of your book, you seem to suggest that the only clear and workable solution is the two-state solution. So I wonder, is that the product of time, or is it the product of a more realistic engagement? I was wondering if you could address that transition.
Well, yes, that's true. George Antonius, in his book, The Arab Awakening, he wrote that book in 1938, 10 years before the creation of Israel. And he was trying to make the case that the Palestinians could live with these new immigrants, and they could live in a binational secular state. And so I'm reporting that. Antonius was a major sort of intellectual influence on my father, and actually on a whole generation of State Department officers, Foreign Service officers, who specialized in the Middle East, Arabs. And so that was Antonius's vision, but it was a road not taken. And we haven't discussed, but at the end of the book, I have this long, well, not long, but a detailed account of the life of an Israeli who was a large influence on my views of the conflict and of what Israel is going to become. Hillel Kook, or otherwise known as, in his American alias, as Peter Bergson, who's a very controversial figure, but I met him in 1978 and on a trip to Israel, and spent a long afternoon with him in which I got his life story. And I just found it an incredible story, and I was attracted to his idea, his notion of not a binational state. Cook had a slightly different view than Antonius or Martin Buber. His notion was that the whole point of establishing Israel was to create a state where the remnants of European Jewry would come, and anyone else who chose to come from America or elsewhere, and they would be citizens alongside the residents, Palestinian, Christian, Muslim, or whatever, in what would be a Hebrew republic, a secular Hebrew republic. And the state would have its national identity based on what most states sort of ground their identity in, their language and their culture. And it would be drenched in Jewish culture, Cook thought, but it would be secular and therefore open to giving full equality to anyone who decided to reside in that 20th century secular state. So I'm trying to, I guess I'm trying to jam a circular block into a square hole or something, but I'm trying to find a way out of the conflict. And like Cook, I think part of the conflict, one of the reasons it's gone on for so long, for more than 6 decades, is that we have this unresolved identity question. And Cook, I thought, had a great vision, and I think that's where actually Israel is headed towards, a Hebrew republic. Most Israelis today live along the Mediterranean in places like Tel Aviv, and they're very secular, and they just want their state. But unfortunately, the politics, as we all know, has been seized on both sides by the sort of what I call the messianic extremists, who look at the whole issue in terms of religion. And that's, I think, very dangerous and unproductive.
Well, in the Jewish world, many often flinch at talk of the binational state for fear that demographic trends would reduce the Jewish population to a minority, and that the rights of the Jews would be compromised. I mean, how do you reckon with that argument?
Well, in the end, I, as you have said, I come down at the end of the book very much in favor of a two-state solution. I think a one-state solution now would be a disaster. It could only happen, drenched in blood and violence. There are, extremes on both sides, both communities, who would violently oppose such a thing. And so I think the eminently rational and humanist thing to do is to have a two-state solution.